The story begins deep in the misty canals of Xochimilco, just south of Mexico City, a place that feels suspended in time. The water moves slowly, dark and reflective, carrying whispers of an old legend that locals never dare to speak of after sunset. The boatmen who guide tourists through those narrow waterways will point to an island covered in tangled trees and swaying branches, but their eyes always avoid looking too long. They call it La Isla de las Muñecas, the Island of the Dolls. Years ago, this place was not the grotesque shrine of rotting dolls that it is today. It was quiet, lonely, just a forgotten patch of land floating in the canals. But everything changed in the 1950s when a man named Don Julián Santana arrived. Julian was not a madman, at least not at first. He was a man searching for peace. He left behind his family, his friends, and the busy noise of the city to live a simple life on the island, tending a garden, fishing, and trading vegetables with passing boats. He believed the isolation would heal him, but he was wrong. One gray afternoon, as the air hung thick with the smell of rain, Julian heard a strange sound. It was faint, like a child crying somewhere across the canal. He followed the sound, pushing through wet reeds until he saw it. A small figure floating face down in the water. It was the body of a young girl. Her skin was pale, her dress torn, and one of her hands still clutched a small, waterlogged doll. Julian pulled her out, but it was too late. The girl was dead. He buried her as best he could near the edge of the island, saying a prayer he could barely remember. He placed the doll she had held on a tree beside her grave, thinking it might protect her soul. But from that moment, nothing was ever the same. At night, Julian began to hear things. Faint splashes, soft footsteps, a girl's laughter carried by the wind. Sometimes he would wake to find the doll's head turned in a different direction, or its arms moved as if it had tried to climb down from the tree. He convinced himself it was the spirit of the drowned girl. She was not at peace. She was lonely. In fear and guilt, he started hanging more dolls. He searched the canals, picking up old broken toys that floated in the water. Some were missing limbs, others were headless or burned, but he didn't care. He believed the dolls could keep the spirit calm, that they could protect him from her wrath. The first few dolls looked harmless enough, like small guardians watching over the island. But over the years, the collection grew. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. Every tree, every post, every inch of the island was covered in dolls. Their faces cracked and rotted under the sun. Their eyes turned cloudy. Their hair tangled in the wind. And yet, Julian said the more dolls he hung, the more voices he heard. The island was alive now, breathing with whispers. Locals who visited him said the place felt wrong, heavy, suffocating, as if unseen eyes followed them. Some claimed to hear faint giggles near the trees. Others swore they saw the dolls blink. Julian didn't deny it. He would nod, his eyes wide, and say, "They talk to me too." People began calling him El Guardian de las Muñecas, the keeper of the dolls. Some said he had gone mad. Others believed he had become part of something supernatural, that the girl's spirit had chosen him as her guardian. Years passed, and Julian withdrew deeper into solitude. He barely spoke, barely ate. He spent his days tending the dolls, cleaning them, repairing their broken limbs, whispering to them as if they were children. He told visitors that the dolls protected him, that they warned him when evil approached. But at night, when the wind rose and the water rippled under the moonlight, neighbors said they could hear him crying, begging someone unseen to leave him alone. There were times when fishermen passing by saw him standing knee-deep in the canal, staring into the water, muttering words they couldn't understand. They said he looked like a man hypnotized, as though the water was calling to him. One day, Julian told a visitor that the little girl's spirit had become angry again. He said she wanted him to join her. The visitor laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. But Julian didn't smile. He only said, "She doesn't like being alone." And then, one morning in 2001, Julian's nephew came to the island to bring him food. He found his uncle's hat floating near the dock. Moments later, he found Julian's body, face down in the same canal where the little girl had drowned half a century earlier. The villagers said it wasn't an accident. They said the girl had taken him. The spirit that haunted him for 50 years had finally claimed her companion. After his death, the island fell silent, but only for a while. People who visited said they could feel something moving among the dolls. Sometimes the dolls would sway when there was no wind. Sometimes, a faint whisper would brush against their ears. To this day, locals say Julian's ghost still wanders the island, tending to his dolls just as he did in life. They say the dolls have taken on part of his soul, that each one holds a fragment of his spirit, his fear, his loneliness. And the little girl? They say she never left either. When the night is still and the moonlight hits the water, some claim to see her shadow moving between the trees, small, barefoot, her head tilted, her hand holding a doll by the arm. Sometimes she stops and looks toward the water, as if waiting for someone. Sometimes, if you're unlucky, she looks at you. That's why no one dares to stay on the island after dark. They say the moment you step off the boat, the dolls begin to watch. Their eyes follow you wherever you go. And if you stay too long, one of them might whisper your name. Because here, on the island of the dolls, every doll has a story. Every doll has a soul. And none of them ever sleep.
As the sun sank into the murky horizon, the island of the dolls changed. What seemed eerie by daylight became unholy under the weight of darkness. The jungle closed in like a living thing, branches clutching at the air, whispering in voices that sounded disturbingly human. Every leaf seemed to tremble, every shadow had shape. Don Julián, the island's lone guardian, had grown used to the company of the dolls, or so he told himself. He spent his days hanging more of them, finding broken porcelain faces floating near the banks, tangled in reeds. He cleaned them gently, muttering prayers, whispering to the spirit of the drowned girl that he believed haunted him. But every night, the whispers grew louder. It started with soft sobs, echoing across the still water. Then came laughter, a child's laugh, faint, carried by the wind, but always near. Julián would rise from his hammock, clutching his old lantern, eyes wide with fear. "Nina," he would whisper into the night. "Is that you?" The dolls seemed to answer. Their glass eyes glinted under the flame, their heads turning just slightly. The old man would freeze, his breath caught in his throat. He told himself it was the wind, the weight of years alone. But the more he tried to ignore it, the stronger the presence became. The island, it seemed, was alive. Visitors began to arrive, curious travelers from Mexico City, photographers and skeptics. They would leave offerings, fascinated by the story of the drowned girl and her silent army of dolls. Some left toys, others coins or notes asking for protection. One night, a group of young tourists decided to spend the night. They laughed, drinking, shining flashlights into the hollow-eyed faces. One of them, a girl, picked up a doll with tangled hair and joked, "She's watching us." The laughter faded when the doll's head turned on its own. Panic erupted. The group ran for their boat, the water eerily still, the air too heavy to breathe. When they reached the mainland, one of them swore he saw something in the water, a pale face staring up from below, hair floating around it like weeds. Word spread. Locals began to call it cursed. Julián, however, refused to leave. He said the girl spoke to him now, told him what the dolls wanted. He began to hang them higher, deeper into the trees, their bodies swaying above him like grotesque fruit. He built shrines, decorated with candles and flowers, whispering names no one else could hear. The villagers noticed a change in him. His eyes darkened, his words slurred between prayers and nonsense. He claimed the girl was no longer alone, that others had joined her. Spirits lost in the canals. Spirits drawn to the dolls. Some nights, lights flickered across the water. People whispered that they saw shapes moving between the trees. Children's laughter echoed over the swamp, long after midnight. One morning, the villagers found Julián's boat floating empty. He was gone. They searched the island for hours, calling his name. Then, under the same spot where the girl had drowned years ago, they found him, face down, lifeless. It was as if the island had claimed him too. The villagers buried him on the island, among the dolls he loved. And that night, the silence was unbearable. No birds, no wind, just the creak of string, the gentle tap of porcelain against wood. The next morning, one of the villagers returned to light candles in his honor. As she knelt by his grave, she felt eyes on her. Looking up, she saw the dolls, all of them, turned toward her. Every single one. Since then, those who visit say the same thing. They hear whispers, faint and pleading. Some say they see a girl in white, her reflection rippling on the water, even when no one is there. Others swear they see Julian himself, standing at the dock, lantern in hand, watching the canal in silence. The dolls are said to move at night. Some disappear. Others appear where they were never hung. One traveler claimed that as he slept near the dock, he felt something cold touch his cheek. When he opened his eyes, a doll was lying beside him, eyes wide open, its tiny porcelain hand resting on his shoulder. He never returned. The legend endures, whispered in villages, told around fires, spreading far beyond Mexico. They say that the island feeds on fear, that it hungers for those who dare to mock the dead. And if you go there, if you bring a doll to offer, you might feel the wind shift, the air grow heavy. You might see the water ripple, though nothing moves. And if you listen closely enough, you might hear her crying, the child who drowned, the spirit who never left, the one who now watches through 1,000 unblinking eyes. The Island of the Dolls, where silence screams and the dead still play.